Hey friends, in today's episode, I'm in my garage. I'm going to be repurposing some old kitchen cabinet doors and giving them some new life. A friend of ours redid their kitchen and gave us all of their kitchen cabinet doors. They've been sitting in our shop for a couple of years now. I've just been trying to decide what I want to make with them. I have a few projects in mind to create some high-end home decor. I'm going to go out to my building and my pole shed to see if I can find some scrap wood pieces to make these projects with as little money as possible. So if you have some old kitchen cabinet doors, or maybe you find some at the thrift store, Goodwill, or Habitat for Humanity, I hope these projects inspire you and give you some ideas on how to give these cabinet doors new life. I hope you enjoy. I wasn't sure what all I would need, so I pulled out these few pieces to start off with. This is just some scrap wood from an old crate, and then I have some baseboards, and then some cut-off pieces. So we'll see what we can come up with. For my first project, I'm starting off with these 3 cabinet doors. They measure around 25 inches by 18 3/8 of an inch, and I did make sure that each one of these were the exact same measurements. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the handles and the hinges and place each of these in a basket so I can keep up with them. I like to keep the handles and stuff for future projects. Now I intended on keeping the hinges, but they did not want to come up that easily. I ended up having to take a flathead screwdriver and prying up on each side to be able to get that out. I had to do this for all of the cabinet doors, so none of the hinges were salvageable because those little side tabs bent. Using some warm soapy water, I did go over each one of these and really clean them up. Because they have been sitting in our shop for a couple of years, they had a lot of dirt and grime on them, and it also gave me the opportunity to see if there were any little spots on there that really needed to be scrubbed or if they needed to be sanded before prepping them for any kind of paint. There was like some paint chips on there that I was able to get off with my fingernail. I also went back over each one of these and thoroughly dried them off. I'll be using my Kreg jig and my drill to drill in pocket holes in each of these doors to join them together. It's going to give it a really strong hold, but if you don't have a Kreg jig, you can purchase these steel plates at any hardware store. They can join 2 pieces of wood together and also give it a really strong hold. I'm going to drill my pocket holes on the opposite side, and I want to do this on the back side of the cabinet. So I'm just going to set this into my Kreg jig, and then you push that clamp down so it'll be nice and tight. And I use a piece of wood to prop on the other side to kind of keep it level. Then I can drill 3 holes on this side. I'm going to put 1 on that end, and then I'll move it to the middle, drill 1 in the middle, and 1 on the opposite end. I am creating a headboard. Last year my sister downsized in her home, and when she did, she went from a king-size bed to a full-size bed, and she doesn't have a headboard. So I want to make her a headboard, and I want it to have like a ledger board at the top, so I am going to drill 2 pocket holes at the top of each of these doors. Now that I have drilled all of the pocket holes, on the right-hand side I have 3 and then 2 at the top. Then the one in the middle, I went ahead and drilled 2 to go in the center of those 2 at the top and 2 on the right. That's just for extra strength. It's probably not even necessary because I have the 3 on the opposite side and 2 at the top, but I want to make sure this piece really stays together. Now it's time to join these 3 cabinet doors together using those pocket hole screws. So I'm going to clamp the door down and then push the next one up as close as I can and clamp it down. And what you do not want to do is, like I just did, put my hand right in front of it trying to hold it together, because if your drill slips, then you have to spend the next 10 minutes cleaning up your finger and putting on a band-aid. So please be careful and grab the other side like you see me doing here to really push the two together, and then when you get that last little bit of the screw in, it'll pull it together. Once you have all of those screws together, you're going to have one sturdy piece. Now, before we add our ledger board, I'm going to use this high performance wood filler. We already had this in our shop, but you can find this at your local home improvement store, Lowe's or Home Depot. You do have to add a hardener to it, and it'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes work time, so you only want to mix up what you're going to use at that moment. And you also want to do this in a well-ventilated area because it has a very strong odor. I am going to fill in each of the holes where the handles were. I let it set up for about an hour before I turned the piece over so that I could attach that ledger board to the top. I happen to have a baseboard piece that was the perfect length for this. To attach it, I am going to use some clamps. I pulled the headboard piece all the way to the edge of the table so that I could line this up so it'll be in the front of the headboard. And then I used clamps to hold it in place in 3 different areas. Then I could take my pocket hole screws and attach that ledger board to the top. Each time I add a screw, I will move the clamp to the next pocket hole to make sure that the ledger board is as tight to the headboard as I can get it, and then add the next pocket hole screw. And I'll do that all the way across the top of the headboard. And this is what it's looking like so far from the front. Now I'm going to take my electric sander and go over all of the areas that I added the wood filler to flatten that out and smooth it out. And I'm also going to go over this with a very fine grit sandpaper just to scuff it up just a little bit to prep it for paint. I am going to be using a chalk paint which will adhere to most anything, but I do want to scuff it up a bit. And to get in some of those more detailed areas, I'm going to put like this sponge pad just to kind of get down into all of those grooves. Once I have all of that completed, I am going to make sure I wipe it off completely and make sure it is dust free to get ready for paint. But before I paint it, I am going to add 2 heavy duty D-rings to the back so that she can hang this up. You can find an assorted pack like this at Lowe's, and I'll try to leave links to all of this in my description box below if you're interested. I do recommend drilling pilot holes before you add the D-rings and screws just to prevent anything from cracking or splitting. And because this is pretty heavy, these are heavy duty D-rings, and she could put anchors in the wall with screws to hang this up. And as I mentioned previously, I am using a chalky finish paint. This is made by Krylon. You can find this at Lowe's. I'm going to do the details with a brush and then smooth it out with a roller. And she chose the color black. This is what it looks like about an hour after applying the first coat. So I'm going to apply a second coat and allow that to dry for several hours before I apply a clear wax. I will be using this clear sealing wax made by Krylon, and I already had this on hand, as well as a wax brush. And again, I'll try to have links for these in my description box below. The clear wax is going to protect that chalk paint finish and help it to keep from chipping or fading. I'm going to apply that using a brush, and you want to do it in small sections at a time. Then take a microfiber cloth to remove the excess and blend that in. You want to let that dry for at least 24 to 48 hours before you hang it up. You can, move it around with light use, but you want that wax to cure to protect that paint. This is how it looks about 4 hours after the wax was applied. We waited about 48 hours, hung it up, and she is so happy with how it turned out. For the next project, I'm using one cabinet door. It measures about 12 1/4 of an inch by 27 3/4 of an inch. Just like in the previous project, I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the hardware and the handle and use that high performance wood filler to fill in the holes where the handle was. For this project, I'm going to be using a piece of scrap wood. It measures about 3/4 of an inch thick. It's about 2 5/8 of an inch wide. And I am going to cut this down to 29 3/4 of an inch to give me an inch on each side. This is just a cut-off piece from a piece of cabinet wood that we already had. Using the Craig jig, I'm going to drill 3 pocket holes so that we can attach that piece of wood to form as a ledger board, just like we did for the headboard, except for this cabinet door I'm turning into a coat rack. I'm going to attach that board just like I did in the previous project by using some clamps and screwing in those pocket screws. Then I'm going to attach 3 small D-rings to the back, pre-drilling each one of my holes, just a pilot hole. You don't want it to go all the way through. Then I can attach each of those D-rings, and again, I'll use anchors in the wall to hang this up since it will have heavy coats on it. Then I'll make sure to sand everything down to prep it for paint. I'm going to use a fine grit sandpaper to smooth it out, and then that scuffing pad to really get into the grooves and the details, just to scuff it up. Once finished with that, I'll make sure to wipe everything down to remove any debris. Then I'm going to set this on blocks of wood to set it up so I'll be able to easily paint it, especially the outside edges. And since I already had that black chalk paint, I am going to give this 2 coats of that same paint and let it thoroughly dry, and then I will go over it with some of the clear wax to protect that paint. Now that I've allowed the wax time enough to set up, I'm going to be adding these coat hooks, and I found these at Lowe's. I went ahead and purchased 3 of them, and I think they're going to look really good up against this black paint. Now I did go ahead and measure and mark where I wanted to place each of these hooks, and I drilled pilot holes before screwing each one of these in, and this is how it turned out. For the next project, I'm using a cabinet door that measures about 23 1/4 by 12 7/8. I've already pre-filled the holes in with wood filler and removed all of the hardware. Now I've got to contend with these stickers on the back, so I'm just going to use my heating tool and peel those up, as well as a putty knife to kind of get all of that excess glue off. I have these large snowman figures that you can find at Hobby Lobby. I've had them in my craft room for a while. They come in a pack of 6 for around $5, but a lot of times you can get them when they're on sale, and I thought these would make perfect legs for this tray. I also have some wooden pieces. These came from Dollar Tree on the left, and the ones on the right came from Hobby Lobby, but I thought I could use these to fill in those big holes in the back of the cabinet door, as well as use some caulk. Even though you may not be able to see them, I just don't want to take the chance on being able to see these large holes. So I'm going to use some super glue and glue one of those wood pieces from Dollar Tree into each of the holes, and then use the super glue to attach the snowman figures to each of the corners to serve as legs. And once I've allowed time enough for the super glue to set up, I'm going to use that caulk to fill in any of the holes that are on the back of the cabinet door, as well as fill in the gap between the wood pieces and the hole where the hinge was. And then I can smooth that out with a putty knife and let all of that caulk cure. Once the caulk was set up, I went over this entire piece using that sanding sponge just to scuff it up and get it ready for paint. And I made sure to go over it and thoroughly wipe it down and dry it. Then I'm going to use these painting cones so that I can flip this over. I'm going to start on the bottom side and paint it. I'm using a white chalky finish paint made by Krylon. And this will take 2 coats to really cover that up and give it a nice even coverage. While that side is drying, I decided to take 2 of the handles and clean them up really well. Take those outside and give them 1 coat of a matte black spray paint on all sides. Once the bottom side of the tray was dry, I flipped that over and painted 2 coats on that side, let that thoroughly dry, and then I went over it with the clear wax. I think you could use this in various different ways. You could use it as a riser or a tray. I thought it would be nice to set it in the center of the table, and if you're having a gathering, you could place plates or napkins underneath. Like if you wanted to have dessert, you could have everything right there at the table. And I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to have the handles on there or not, so I'm just going to set them on there and let you guys see. And you let me know if it looks better with or without the handles. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found tons of inspiration. And if you have a favorite out of today's projects, please let me know in the comment section down below, because I always love to know which one is your favorite. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.